April 5, 1933. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed a piece of paper that would criminalize gold ownership for every American citizen overnight. Executive Order 6102. 4 pages that turned ordinary Americans into criminals for owning the money humanity had used for 4,000 years. By sunset, holding a gold coin could land you in federal prison for 10 years and cost you $10,000 in fines, equivalent to $200,000 today. This wasn't wartime confiscation. This wasn't temporary emergency policy. This was the largest theft in American history, disguised as economic recovery. Roosevelt didn't just steal America's gold. He stole the foundation of money itself and convinced Americans to thank him for saving the economy. This is the story of how the U.S. government committed grand theft on a national scale and got away with it by calling it the New Deal. For nearly 150 years, American money was backed by gold. Every dollar bill could be exchanged for actual gold at any bank. Paper money wasn't money. It was a promise to pay money. The gold standard meant the government couldn't print money without gold reserves. They couldn't inflate the currency, fund unlimited wars, or spend beyond their means. Gold was honest money that governments couldn't manipulate. Americans trusted gold more than politicians. They saved gold coins, passed them to children, and used them for major purchases. Gold represented security, independence, and protection from government economic mismanagement. But by 1933, America faced its worst economic crisis in history. The Great Depression had destroyed banks, wiped out savings, and left 25% of Americans unemployed. Traditional economic thinking said the solution was to balance budgets, cut spending, and wait for markets to recover. But Roosevelt had different ideas that required different money. He wanted to spend massive amounts on government programs, public works, and economic stimulus. The gold standard prevented this because spending required gold backing. Roosevelt faced a choice: respect constitutional money or seize control of the financial system. On April 5, 1933, he chose power over principle. Executive Order 6102 was crafted in secret by Treasury officials and Roosevelt's brain trust. They studied how European governments had confiscated gold during World War I and adapted those techniques for peacetime America. The order was deliberately confusing, filled with legal language designed to hide its true purpose. Most Americans didn't understand they were being robbed until it was too late. I, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States, declare that a national emergency exists and require the delivery of all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates to Federal Reserve banks. The language made theft sound like patriotic duty. Americans weren't being robbed. They were delivering their gold to help their country during a national emergency. But buried in the technical language was the real crime. The government was confiscating private property without compensation at fair market value. The order required Americans to surrender their gold by May 1, 1933, less than 4 weeks. Anyone who kept their gold after the deadline became a federal criminal. The government offered $20.67 per ounce in paper money. But immediately after confiscation was complete, Roosevelt revalued gold to $35 per ounce, a 69% increase. Americans were forced to sell their gold for $20.67, then watch the government immediately value the same gold at $35. The government made $14.33 profit on every ounce they stole from citizens. This wasn't economic policy. It was the largest theft in American history, executed with legal paperwork and enforced by federal agents. Most Americans complied because they trusted their government and feared imprisonment. FBI agents and Treasury investigators pursued those who didn't surrender their gold voluntarily. The most famous case was Frederick Barber Campbell, a lawyer who challenged the order in court. He argued that confiscating gold violated the Fifth Amendment's protection against seizure of private property without just compensation. The Supreme Court upheld the gold confiscation in the Gold Clause cases, ruling that the government's power to regulate money superseded individual property rights. This decision established the precedent that the government could seize any asset deemed necessary for economic policy. private property rights became subordinate to government monetary control. Roosevelt's real goal wasn't helping Americans, it was gaining control over monetary policy. With gold removed from circulation, the government could print unlimited paper money without backing. The moment Americans surrendered their gold, sound money died. The dollar became whatever the government said it was worth, backed by nothing except government promises. Roosevelt immediately began printing money to fund New Deal programs. Between 1933 and 1940, the money supply expanded dramatically, creating the inflation that gold had prevented. Americans who had saved gold for decades watched their life savings lose purchasing power as the government printed money to fund political promises. But the psychological manipulation was masterful. Roosevelt convinced Americans they were sacrificing for the greater good while he was actually stealing their wealth to fund his political agenda. The propaganda campaign portrayed gold ownership as unpatriotic hoarding, while government spending was presented as economic salvation. Americans were taught to distrust gold and trust politicians. Newspapers, controlled by pro-Roosevelt publishers, ran articles explaining why gold confiscation was necessary and beneficial. Critics were labeled as selfish hoarders, undermining economic recovery. The educational system began teaching that the gold standard was primitive and that modern economies required flexible, government-managed money. Gold became associated with backwardness and instability. Within a generation, Americans forgot that money had ever been anything other than government paper. The idea that gold was real money seemed quaint and outdated. Roosevelt had successfully re-engineered American psychology around money. Citizens learned to trust government promises instead of tangible assets. The economic effects were exactly what economists predicted. Without gold backing, the government could fund any program, fight any war, and make any promise without regard for actual resources. World War II spending exploded the money supply. The Korean War, Vietnam War, and Great Society programs required printing money that would have been impossible under the gold standard. Each printed dollar diluted the value of existing dollars. Americans' savings lost purchasing power while the government gained unlimited spending ability. The middle class was slowly impoverished through monetary inflation while being told they were benefiting from economic growth and government programs. By 1971, even the limited gold backing for international transactions became unsustainable. President Nixon ended the last connection between gold and the dollar, completing Roosevelt's work. The dollar became pure fiat currency, government monopoly money backed by nothing except legal tender laws and military power. Since 1933, the dollar has lost over 96% of its purchasing power. What cost $1 in 1933 costs over $25 today. This wasn't natural economic evolution. It was the predictable result of removing honest money. Meanwhile, gold has maintained its purchasing power for thousands of years. An ounce of gold today buys roughly the same amount of goods as an ounce of gold in ancient Rome. The difference between gold and paper money isn't technical, it's political. Gold limits government power. Paper money enables unlimited government expansion. Roosevelt didn't solve the Great Depression by confiscating gold. Economic recovery came from production, innovation, and World War II industrial demand. The gold confiscation simply transferred wealth from citizens to government. But the real damage was constitutional and psychological. Roosevelt established that the government could seize private property for economic policy purposes. This precedent enabled every subsequent expansion of government power over individual rights. If the government could steal gold, it could control any aspect of economic life. Modern Americans live with the consequences of Roosevelt's theft. Every dollar in your wallet is backed by government promises instead of tangible value. Your savings lose purchasing power to inflation, hidden taxation through money printing. Your financial future depends on politicians' economic decisions rather than sound monetary principles. The Federal Reserve can create trillions of dollars electronically, diluting your money's value to fund government spending and bank bailouts. This power exists because Roosevelt eliminated the gold standard that prevented such manipulation. Today's housing prices, student debt crisis, and wealth inequality are directly connected to fiat money printing that began with gold confiscation. So what can you learn from America's greatest theft? First, understand that government promises aren't money. Paper currency is an IOU backed by political promises that can be broken at any time. Second, recognize that inflation is taxation without representation. When governments print money, they're taking purchasing power from your savings without your consent. Third, diversify away from pure fiat currency dependence. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, and real assets maintain value when governments debase currency. Fourth, study monetary history. Every fiat currency in history has eventually collapsed. The dollar's 90-year experiment with pure paper money is historically unusual and unsustainable. Finally, understand that sound money protects individual freedom. Gold prevents governments from funding unlimited wars, welfare states, and economic manipulation through monetary expansion. The choice between gold and paper money isn't economic, it's political. Gold money limits government power. Fiat money gives governments unlimited power over individual wealth. April 5, 1933. The day America stopped being the land of the free and became the land of government monopoly. Money. Roosevelt didn't save America from economic depression. He enslaved America to monetary manipulation that continues today. Every American who surrendered their gold thought they were helping their country. They were actually surrendering their financial independence to a government that promised prosperity through theft. The gold is gone. The theft was legalized. The precedent was established. But understanding this history is the first step toward protecting yourself from future government monetary manipulation. Your money, your savings, your financial future, all depend on understanding what happened when America stole everyone's gold and called it economic recovery. What do you think? Did Roosevelt save America or steal from Americans? How has fiat currency affected your family's financial security? Share your thoughts below. Let's discuss how monetary policy shapes our daily lives. If this hidden history revealed something schools never taught you about money and government power, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the economic forces that control our wealth. Until next time, remember, when government controls money, government controls you. Sound money is the foundation of individual freedom.